Here?
Ms. Abrams.
I think
She's in the restroom.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to go on. First item, Ms. Stilley, would you like to
Yes.
do item A, consider approval to rename our committee?
Yes, actually, we do not need to have this approval on this item because according to policy, it's not called Vision 2020 in the first place. And so, Mr. Duncan, what is the official name? It's the Steering Strategic.
Vision. Vision and strategic.
Vision and
plan.
Strategic Planning.
Vision and Strategic Planning Committee. So we, at first we thought it was Vision 2020, and we thought we needed to make it, 2025, but it's not correct. So we just can waive or take that one off. We don't need to make any motions, or we don't need any action for number one, the first one.
Okay. All right, then.
Yep, and number
Move on to
two.
number two.
Yep. And in fact, tonight, we're not going to actually seek your approval of this tonight. What I would like to do is go through the process that we've gone through for development of our strategic plan. And then when Ms. Jenkins puts out the agenda for next week, which will be July 20th, we'll have this as a board agenda item. And she will attach the strategic plan and information to the agenda that goes out, and we usually get that out by Thursday afternoon before we leave that afternoon. So actually, for today's purposes, we do not need to get a vote of approval, but I would like to just have you, absorb and, get up to date on where we are with our process, if that works for you guys. Let's see. All right, there we go. So I want to start just to recap our strategic plan process. In 2018, we developed our first strategic plan. It was a 3-year plan. And so this year is, the third year of that plan. And so it was time in January to begin working on our next 3 to 5 year plan. We heard of a state pilot through the Department of Education that was to support and assist districts in development of strategic plans and aligning budgets. So we asked to be a part of that. In early February, we kicked off our initial meetings. The way that the Department of Education set this up is that they had a vendor that worked, sort of picture an umbrella, that worked with the department, and then under that they had districts, about I think it was 6 or 8 school districts, that then were paired with specific vendors who specialize in the area of strategic planning. And so all of that matching took place in February, early February, and then we began to kick off. One of the first things that they wanted us to do was to identify a steering committee members, which I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. And so we developed this partnership with a vendor, which is School Leadership Center out of New Orleans. And then there's another vendor that's working, overseeing this whole process statewide. And we were in cohort 1, and then they're going to pick up another cohort of any districts that are interested throughout the state. One of the benefits of this is that, one, we come out with a really strong strategic plan based on the input of our people, the voice of our people. And secondly, it didn't cost us anything because through the pilot, the Department of Education paid for the support of both the vendors during this process. So in the second part of this strategic planning process was the diagnostic, getting the data and getting feedback from the stakeholders. And I think that what's really, really different about this strategic plan as compared to the plan that we did in 2018, this process went into depth in getting input from our families, our students, our teachers, all of our employees, our principals, our community members, all were involved, and their input, we sought out their input in this process. You know how we hear a lot of times, well, the central office comes up with this stuff and they push it all down to us. Well, this was the reverse. This was based on feedback from our people and what they're saying are concerns that they have about our school district. And one of the wonderful things about this is that school leadership led this part. So, you know, sometimes when you're involved with collecting data and people say things that hurt your feelings, you know, it's hard to stay objective. Well, in this part of the process, school leadership led the effort to engage and gather all of this feedback from our people and what they are saying about our school system and the things that we need to improve on. And then they gave us basically the strengths and weaknesses, the gaps, and the achievements in the different areas, along with the test data. Now, you know, as we all know, because of COVID, we did not have test data last school year in 2020, right? 'Cause our students didn't test. So the test data that they pulled, for the most part, is from 2019, so it's a little delayed back a year. And we're hoping, because our students tested this year, that we will have some data that we can bring back to this committee. And this plan is a fluid plan, meaning that, you know, we may get into it in the second quarter and look at our data and decide that we need to do some tweaking and bring this, you know, through the board again and keep the public informed of what we're doing. So in the diagnostic part, we did survey. They did surveys, school leadership. They sent out electronic surveys to every single family and parent, to every student, every single employee in the school district. They commented in one of our meetings, or several of them, that we had almost 40% of our parents and almost 40% of our students responded to these electronic surveys. They had never worked with a district that had this kind of response back on surveys. So they were very impressed with that. Then they did focus groups. They took little small groups of teachers, small groups of principals, small groups of parents, small groups of students, and they just sat with them. Or I think many of them they did actually through Zoom. Some of them were face-to-face. But they would ask them a series of questions and just sort of see what those trends were coming from the focus groups. And then they did individual interviews with parish leaders. And so there were different individuals from the parish level in which they interviewed one-to-one to get information from them as well. So they took all of that information, they looked at all of our student information, and then they provided us with a diagnostic. And then the third step, our steering committee looked at all of this diagnostic with the support and assistance of our vendor, and we identified priority areas. You know, there were 6 major areas that would address what our people are telling us. And then from there, we developed out initiatives and deliverables and actions. So it's a pretty in-depth plan, but I'm going to try to give you the skinny of it and then share with you all the details, and then you can, you know, read all of the specifics on the actions and so forth. The fourth part of this process starts really after the board approves it and we begin implementation. And then the progress monitoring, which will occur throughout the 3 years, and the public reporting, which I think the best probably avenue is to bring it through this committee for public reporting, but we can, you know, come to a consensus on that. But there are metrics involved, and there will be progress monitoring that will occur throughout the time. And the neat thing about this is that the vendor, school leadership, stays with us, and the other vendor stays with us, as well as the Department of Ed, to help us with the dashboard and the progress monitoring throughout the time period of the strategic plan. So this is an overview of the process. The steering committee members, they were very specific on who served on the steering committee. They wanted the direct reports to the superintendent. They wanted the person that was in charge of academics. They wanted the person that led a lot of the work with the student services piece on discipline and culture. They wanted a board member, and Ms. Abrams served as a board member on the committee. And then they wanted a project manager, somebody that would just keep up with the email, like every week we'd meet, we'd have, all these conversations. And so Ms. Therese was the person to kind of help us keep straight all the times that we met and the materials and make sure we were on target with timeline. So these were the individuals that served on the steering committee that met their criteria and what, really what they kind of came in with the format of how to do this, and then they kind of led us each part of the way. So this is the first chunk that we did. So again, the feedback from stakeholders was a key part of this, surveys, small groups, individual interviews, and then you may remember that we came back at a point where we had a draft we fleshed out some priorities and we fleshed out some initiatives. We had some strengths and weaknesses. We shared that with our principals and, wanted their feedback on this, on did it sound right? Did it feel right? Did it seem like it was, meeting the need of what the data and the surveys and such said? The teacher advisory was another group that we vetted the draft with. And then, of course, I shared an email with the board members, and then also we talked about the data that we collected, the diagnostic piece. I think was the face-to-face that we talked about, the diagnostic data that was involved here. They used the latest test data. They look at discipline, state test data, and school performance results, which, again, was 2019. So the steering committee responded to the diagnostic by aligning to, there were 6 strategic priorities that are listed here that, we landed on based on the diagnostics. And part of this process is that our team was working to come out with the priority areas, but also both of the vendors, both our direct vendor and the one that worked with the state, vetted these. Like, they looked back at the data to make sure that every one of these, there was data to support this priority. So either there was a trend of families saying this, or students, or employees, or all three, or there was test data, or there was both. So these priorities were not just like, us sitting around the table saying, well, we need to do, tier 1, we need to make sure that's right. These are all tie back to the diagnostic that we did. And of course, the 6 priorities would be continuing with the tier 1 curriculum. In our last testing cycle in 2019, we had just implemented tier 1 for probably 6 months, 8 months, something like that. Before it was tested, so really focusing on developing teachers as experts of content in that area and doing more with that, building a positive school culture that supports student well-being, strengthening the communication and relationships with central office, between central office, schools, and families, and then recruiting and retaining a diverse team of highly effective teachers and leaders. The 5th one is really about making sure that, the strategy and the strategic plan and the budgeting and the funding are aligned. That we're not spending money on stuff that's not a part of what the strategy is and what the plan is. And looking at program effectiveness. Is it working? And then 6, number 6 is to address our DNF schools. That's to create a comprehensive turnaround model for schools that are in need of intensive support. These are our low-performing schools in which we would have a much more intense focus on what we would do to assist those schools improve. So these are like broad, big picture, 6 priorities tied back to what the diagnostic evidence was. So we started with, we generated and prioritized and sequenced. So the idea with strategic planning is you start broad and then you keep narrowing down till you have a very specific set of initiatives that are right size. So, there's probably hundreds of things we could do, right? I mean, there's hundreds of things we could do to get better. But, it has to be doable. And it has to be scalable, or else you'll fail. And so part of this process was to get us very narrowed in our focus and get the right size and the right number of initiatives that are around our priorities. This is a sample page, and if you click where it says click here, it'll take you to the Excel document. It's actually Google Slides. And this document was our work document. So we started with this, and every meeting we filled in different pieces. But the way that this is organized, what'd I do?
It's okay, we'll start all over.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely pressed the wrong button here. Is that the wrong one? Sorry, guys. On this one, I was trying to do the light, but I don't think it's working.
It's a little red.
All right, so in the at the top, you see the priority. Remember the 6 priorities? Well, the second one here, this example, is the school culture and well-being. Okay. Under that, you see the initiative. So you have a handout in front of you, and what we did was, because this is so hard to, these Excel documents are so hard to follow when you pull them on your computer screen, we put it in a Word format. So you have the priorities listed on your page 1. You have, we start with priority 1, initiative 1. Then priority 1, initiative 2. So we list them out for you. The deliverables that you'll see on this particular page are the things. Let's look at this first deliverable. It's talking about well-being. It says Dr. Hurst is the person that's responsible, and that's the deliverable, is that thing that's listed out there. That's what he's supposed to do and get done. And then there's timelines associated. Under that, where it has actions, that's just sort of like all of us had to do actions around our deliverable. Like, it's sort of like our list. Okay, all right, so in order to get this deliverable done, and Dr. Hurst sat down, he typed in, well, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. These are some things that I think have to happen in order to get this deliverable done for the team, okay? So really, when you look at the deliverable and the actions, that's really a very internal work document for us. That's sort of like our blueprint. That we know we've got to do these things in order to get that deliverable done to meet that initiative. So, but the bigger picture for the board, I think, and the public, is to look at the priorities and the initiatives that fall under each priority. But this is the setup, and so when we post this out on the agenda for Thursday, that will be on next week. You can click there, and it takes you to the whole document. There's tabs at the bottom, and you just click on different priorities to look at all of the deliverables, all of the action steps that are involved. This is a sample. One of the other things that we did, and this happened over a series of time, like we didn't sit down in 3 meetings and do all this stuff. So like we chunked it. So, one time we tried to identify this piece, and then they would vet it. They would look back at the data, they would look back at the observations, and we actually had observations of teachers as part of our artifacts. We had survey information, all of that, they looked to see if it was linked. Then the next time we began to work on initiatives. We did that. Then the next time we went back into this worksheet and we started working on what would be the deliverable for this. Then another time we would work more on deliverables and we started filling in action. So this happened over the course of many meetings since February. One of the things they wanted us to do was get aligned with professional development. So any kind of professional development that needed to happen, you know, sometimes student services does professional development, technology's over here, and curriculum's over here, and somebody else is over here, and everybody's doing, and the teachers are like, this is too much, right? So they wanted us to align so we could actually see how many days this would impact a teacher. And so, you know, alignment of knowing what each department is doing and what are they doing it with principals, are they doing it with teachers, are they doing it with assistants? So this was one of the things that we did. Dr. Fussell did a nice one for our district. It's a PD calendar, and we'll be sharing that with you all. It's for the whole year. It's much prettier than this one, by the way, but it's the same information. Then they wanted us to look at the initiatives and think about, were there any costs associated to these initiatives? Like, did we think that there may be some costs that would occur, possibly? So we looked at that. We had a rationale on why we thought we needed these costs. This is on your page 4 and 5 of your handout, and you can see it actually. This is hard to see. But if you click where it says click here or initiatives here, you can actually see the whole thing. But you have the whole thing printed in front of you. But it has what initiative it is, you had to have a rationale on why you wanted to even include this in any kind of budgeting. And then about how much money you think it is, because, you know, it's an estimate. And then we had to answer the question, do we have available funds for this? And then if we do, where is it coming from? So Brett, Kay, Ms. Lanier, who does federal programs, Mr. Jinko, Dr. Fussell, a whole team of them sat down and just worked on, okay, these are the needs. Do we have the money in this area? Which Title I account, is it Title I, Title II, Title IV, blah, 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 blah. And how much do we think it's going to be approximate? So this process was really one of the last things we did in looking at, you know, what we need to support these particular things in the budget. One of the things that we spent probably, 2 of our meetings on, and this went through a lot of vetting with the vendors because, again, they looked at the evidence, the diagnostics, they looked at our test scores, and there's a list here. You have this in your handout so you can actually, you know, probably see it better, but it's a list of all the measures on how are we going to monitor this strategic plan. Because, you know, you can check off and say, well, okay, we had social emotional material, yeah, we had tier 1, yeah, we had, but the bottom line is really, what impact are you having on children, right? And so these are our target measurements. This is what our goals are. And so you'll see what the measurement is. You'll see the baseline, that's where we were in 2019 and the latest test results that we had. And you'll see the conversation, well, you won't see the conversation, but we had conversations about the targets. And one of our goals was to be at least in the 75th percentile in the state. And so they had an Excel document that they would plug in numbers and it would show us like where we would rank in the state if we hit this target or that target. So we spent a lot of time. Brett was in his happy place because we were dealing with you know, numbers and Excel, but we could plug numbers in and it would automatically calculate like where, if we grew this much, where would we be in the state? What would be our percentile? And so there are 2 data points here that we're waiting for baseline data, and that is around school belonging and engagement of our students. And then the last one, which has to do with the percent of African American students that are enrolled in AP, IB, DE honors courses compared to their white peers. So that's a metric that we don't have that data yet, but we're going to plug that in as soon as we get it. So these are the sort of the performance measures. And look, when we got into the room, you know, they were actually, you know, setting them a little, their conversation was about set them low so you can try to achieve them. And we were like, no, we push to be higher in these areas. So, and it even shows how much we would have to grow in a particular year on a couple of these to get to be on track. So this was another good piece of the work that we did here. So this one is a communication plan that they asked to, actually this was sort of, I was the lead on this one. And they wanted us to know, okay, once you finish this process of the plan and you go through the board process and you get approval from the board, or you get the nod to, okay, let's implement, how are you going to communicate this? When are you going to communicate, and who are you going to communicate it to? So this looks at all of our stakeholders, and as you can see, one of the first group, we'll have our district leaders, our school leaders in here on the 28th, and so that's like 2 weeks. It's after the board meeting and all that, but we would want to update them again. They already had the first update, but this would be the final. And so this is sort of the plan on how we would make sure that all of our stakeholders know that not only we have a plan, but how we developed it. And I think that is so neat that, you know, typically we start with what we think we need to do. And who does it impact the most? The people in the schools, right? And the students and the teachers and the parents. This time we flipped it and we started with them and we asked. And we had great participation. And so I think it's important that we communicate the final result to them and that we continue to progress monitor and report out on the metrics and on the targets that we've set for our plan. So at this time, I will stop and take any questions you have. While you're formulating those, we're going to follow up with putting it on the agenda for Tuesday night. We will attach the full plan to the board agenda for public viewing. We will send you we'll send the board, you know, the PowerPoint. You already have this document, I'll send that. And then any other material that we have that you might want to look at. And I think that's next steps. So any questions or any comments?
Well, if you could send us the information prior to we could all review, because you're needing an approval and a motion next week, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if you could send us all that out before you do the agenda, I mean, can we?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a few days to review all that other document.
Yeah.
I think you had emailed us a while back. We got it, but I think y'all changed it and added to it since the one we originally got in June.
Yeah, the one that I sent, the two updates have been the budget piece and probably the target piece where we set our goals and targets. I think those are the two big things that were not included, but all of the priorities, the initiatives, the deliverables and things like that have not changed. Now, we did build out action steps because that's kind of like our to-do list. And we know that we'll start working on this and think, oh, there's something else I need to add to this action thing that I didn't think about when we did this. So that's why we can go in this document and plug those in. It's really a fluid plan, and it's a working plan. So, and it's continue to be based on what's working and what's not, and refining the process.
Anyone have any questions?
Mr. Dooley, I have a question concerning this one mission measure, number 7. Okay, I know that we've been considering and looking at this percentage of African American students that are enrolled in these honor courses. Is this implying that we're still collecting data? Or are we gonna be using the data that we're already sure of? We already have those numbers, right?
Yeah, what this is saying is this is a goal, and this is a target metric for our plan. And we're gonna collect this information based on, in the fall, this fall, once kids get into school and they have their classes and they have their schedules, we're going to assess the percentages and the numbers of kids that are in these classes, and then we'll have the number for this particular metric.
Okay, because this is something that has already been in place, right? We already have these programs in place.
Yeah, we've had
And-
these programs, that's
right?
correct.
And so we already have numbers for the number of African American students that have been participating in these courses already, right? I mean, that data
I'm
is.
not really sure, Mr. Moore, if, I mean, we could have those numbers broken down. I really couldn't say for sure right now because I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
Because
because
it's
that-
not, it would be, really looking at each of these areas and breaking it down by race.
Okay, because I think that we should probably use that as a part of that metrics. I mean, when we start considering, right? We can't eliminate the fact that we've not had or have had that participation in the past.
Yes.
So that, I mean, that has to be
You're talking about for the baseline.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Any other questions?
Do we know yet on Bessie or Department of Education about our test scores from last year? Are they gonna? I see
Well,
Mr. Stallman shaking his head.
you mean the ones we just took in the?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's still out the kids did take the test, those that chose to take the test and that were in school and not, full virtual. And so we do not know at this point if there's gonna be accountability results or there's not. We do not know. So, but we should have some type of data that we can, update with.
Mr. Duncan?
I'm still going back to number 7 that Mr. Moore was asking you about. That was one that kind of jumped out at me for a number of different reasons, but on all the other stuff that you presented, there was kind of a straight line from like a priority to a budget item, a priority to a target measure. There were the different action items. Where does number 7 fit in to the priorities of our strategic plan? And what is the plan it's great to gather that data and have the information, but have y'all worked on some specific ideas on how we can improve those numbers? And again, when I go pull your spreadsheet down, where am I going to find something that emphasizes that?
Yeah, so I think, Mr. Duncan, I don't know that there's a direct item that it links back. I'm trying to remember what it is, but I do know that this is part of the subgroup information. Not the number of kids that are in these courses, but it does impact the student achievement and how kids are potentially scoring on state tests. And then also it could impact the subgroup information in which schools are labeled if their subgroup in different areas are lower than normal. So, but we can make the trace back to and it could have come in with the surveys. I see what you're saying though. You're saying that that particular metric is not a priority nor a,
Well, and it could be, I could see where it would fit in somewhat under priority 1. I could see where it kind of fits under priority 2.1, where, talking about the importance of school culture. I think there's probably going to, when we dig into this, there's probably going to be an argument or possibility that for whatever reason, school culture leads to what certain students feel like they want to enroll in. I don't know, but that's the question I'm asking is, where does that fit in? What are we, when we get this, let's put it this way. we get this information, we figure out the percentages, we see that the percentages are low in comparison to their white peers. What are we gonna do with it? Where's it going into our strategic plan? And what are we gonna do with that information?
Well, I think that the indirect impact is with the actual student achievement and increasing, you know, the idea of actually increasing the enrollment of advanced courses. But I think that what I'm hearing you say is we probably need to know what are we going to do with that? Like, what is the point, I guess, is the,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see that. I think it's important information to have, and
Yeah.
I do think it's important that we have a strategic plan to recruit those students and get more of them enrolled in those courses.
and then what is our plan to increase those numbers?
Right,
Yeah.
how are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
Ms. Tilly, you know, and I know that this is a sore area, and every time I bring it up, it's gonna be sore. And so, I mean, there's no other way to talk about it except just to talk about it. But wouldn't this actually help the board and relieve the pressure of this area of responsibility to establish the office of the Chief Equity Officer and let that be a department, a division that looks into these specific areas?
Well,
I mean, it would basically, you know, help to identify, you know, and,
well, in the plan, Mr. Moore, there are individuals that are already identified for all these areas that are current employees.
I understand that.
And I don't think it would be easier because I think it separates. And the work of equity and improving student achievement is the work of everyone, not just the
And
department.
I agree with that, Ms. Dilly, I agree with that, but the thing is that it would give a confidence to, you know, all the stakeholders, and let me be more specific, the stakeholders in the African-American community, that this is a reassurance that, and it would be a show of good faith to the African-American community, to know that we are actually, you know, embracing, you know, what the judge has identified as a necessary department, you know, in the school system. And I would like to see this as a positive aspect, you know, rather than, you know, something that's controversial. And I mean, and I do realize that it is possibly creating some controversy, but I see it as a resolution, at least for the apprehension that the African-American community has. You know, I've heard, you know, my phone is ringing off the hook, and I sometimes have to ignore it, you know, because it's sometimes back to back. But they want to see something that shows good faith. And
You don't think this shows good faith?
I believe that having a department, right, that they look at as being, you know, an establishment of the school board to assure them that these things are going to happen, you know, would be a positive, an absolute show of good faith.
Well, as I mentioned, you know, we do have public reporting as part of this. We have 2 vendors that are experts in this area that are going to assist us with data reporting throughout. So, you know, all of our stakeholders will know how we are progressing. And again, I just, you know, this work is the work of everyone in the district and not just, you know, 3 or 4 people in the district, in a department. So I guess we've had this conversation before, but I would, you know, I guess we agree to disagree on this topic. But, you know, I really believe, based on my years of experience and, you know, and all of that in education, I just believe that this work is done by everyone and not just by a department of individuals. And in our plan, we've got individuals that are responsible for deliverables. to ensure that it's done. And you'll see a lot of things that are linked to equity and are linked to not only improving academics for all children, but for black children. So, that's all of our goal.
Yeah, under normal circumstances, Ms. Dilly, I would agree with you, but I believe that your point is less pertinent because we have, as a school board, submitted to the judge a request for this position and for the job that it does. And the judge has granted that in lieu of, provisional unitary status. And so now that we appear to be not living up to that, I mean, it's a request that was actually made, in the consent agreement by the school board. And I will admit that I was in total opposition to it. But since the judge has signed it, I've resigned myself to looking at what good can come out of this. And so, this chief executive
Moore,
officer.
I think that.
No, wait,
I hate to be
let me
rude, but
finish,
this is-
Rose. Let me finish, Rose, and then you
We're
can,
way off
you can
topic
say.
of this agenda.
We are not. We're not, Rose. We're talking about something here that is exactly what I'm referring to now. This is all a
I'm
part
going
of
to give
it.
you a couple more minutes, but she's already explained it, and I think that we've already covered it. It's really not on this agenda item. She's explained what she's done. And truly, we're not voting on this tonight. We're supposed to be looking at this. She's going to email us all the information that goes with this for us to review, and then I think the proper time would be after you get all the details and the information to go over and review
Okay,
it
all
at some
right.
other point.
And I will respect that, Rose. I will respect that. But I also think this is a perfect time to mention something that should be reflected in this. We're talking about a Vision 2025. This is something that should be, a part of that.
Mr. Moore. Point taken.
And I rest. I rest.
Okay,
Ms. Janice?
I'm trying to get just some understanding. Ms. Moore, okay, what you're asking is that our chief executive officer be allowed to participate in the baseline for getting the percentages and the determinations of the ratio of the black and white students that are in the honor courses? Is that where you,
I would say,
is that the suggestion?
I would say that it would be included in that responsibility, as a responsibility under that department. But
Okay, I think that we've kind of covered, she's covered everything. I think that is important that we need to know today. We need to digest all this as soon as she sends us the rest of the information. And then if we have further questions, we can write them down. Or, I mean, really, the best time to ask her questions is prior to everybody gathering. If you have questions, so she can help answer prior to, if y'all have questions. Or if you would like to see something maybe added, then the proper time would be to speak to her in private, or whoever's in charge of whatever department it is. And then when we come back next week, we can all have our questions answered.
yeah, and Rose, I would just say that this is the first time I've seen this.
Well, me too, that's what I'm saying, that's why we're not voting today,
Right.
I emailed this to the board.
several weeks ago.
And we had a quarterly meeting in which I shared information about the strategic plan. But I think Ms. Bass would like to say something.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Moore, because you said that we were not in compliance maybe with the judge's order, and I want us to be aware that we are absolutely in compliance with the judge's order. The Office of Equity consists of our CEO and his staff, which is not defined in the court order, and he does have a staff, and every listing of his job description is being covered. There is nothing in the court order that says these positions that yourself and maybe the NAACP have listed. That is not part of the court order. And so I just don't want, we can discuss it more at the board meeting, but I want it to be clear that we are not out of compliance with the order of the court. We have an Office of Equity because Pastor Jackson, our CEO, is our CEO, and he has a staff. and he is doing what the work is in coordination with others in the district. So we are not in compliance. That's it.
Okay, well, I think if there's no other information from Ms. Tilly, then we'll call this meeting adjourned.